Hello everyone. So the heat here has finally quieted down, which means I can finally get to the repots I so badly need to do. The orchids I have to try and get through today are mostly pretty straightforward to repot, so I thought we could also do another unpopular opinions video, since we haven't done one of those in a really long time. The first orchid I have here to repot, and it's kind of an emergency, and I hate that I've been putting it off because of the heat. But seriously, it's been impossible to even be in this room to water them, let alone just sit here for a couple of hours and get through some repots. Is our Maxillaria schunkeana. Because, as you can clearly see, something's going on here. Maybe it's just the old bulbs that are getting old and dying off, but they're a bit squishy. So that doesn't bode well, and it really needs to be intervened. On the other hand, and I'm a bit embarrassed to admit this has been going on for a couple of months already, and from my experience with these types of infections, if it was something bad, it would have spread a lot quicker. So maybe these just rotted off by themselves. Either way, it needs to be taken care of, and there's no better time than today. I obviously soak the plant before the repot, that's why this is so soaking wet. Don't worry, this is not how I keep my orchids generally. Although with the heat we've been having, I'm pretty sure it would have gone from this soaked to dry in a couple of days. You can also see that somehow this orchid grew this beautiful moss in the surface of the pot. And this is something that's been happening a lot in our orchid pots, and different species of moss really. This one is more of a velvety one, but we get all different types of mosses growing in our orchid pots. And I know a lot of people hate that, but this is kind of a little bonus and popular opinion. I think it looks great. I think it helps keep humidity in the pot, and I've never seen it affect the plants negatively. So I don't know why people get so upset when this happens. If there's any reason that I'm not thinking about, let me know, because so far I really like it. So what I'm probably going to do is I'm not going to keep this here because, I like it, but it's not worth it to transplant to the new pot. What we do is we have these stakeout containers that we usually lay down these mosses and keep them propagating, probably until we can get around to building that terrarium we keep talking about that never happens. So right now we have a couple of containers of all these beautiful different mosses. And most of them came naturally to the orchid pots. I don't know what type of seeds came with the plants or with the medium, but I'm not mad about it. Now, as you can see, I thought that maybe these were two sections of plant, and that somehow the older bulbs on each were dying off, but no, this is a single plant, and clearly it's the middle section that got affected by something. And as you can see, it's really, really squishy. So this needs to come off, and I need to take a very close inspection of the other bulbs to make sure whatever it is not spreading. It hasn't gone from these 3 bulbs to the rest of the plant in the past couple of months, but I don't like that these leaves are browning, so I'm going to clean this off very well, and then we'll get back to the repotting. Okay, so now I'm going to use some cinnamon, just in case, on the cuts. Although they look pretty healthy, considering the other bulbs look so iffy, I would feel safer just dabbing some cinnamon on the cuts. This could actually work perfectly. It's a smaller pot, but as you can see, the roots aren't that deep, even when it was in a pot like this big. So I'm gonna try it in the smaller one. So I have here to repot this plant, I have some medium-sized bark and some sphagnum. Before it was in smaller grade bark, but we're still having a lot of difficulties finding a supplier for good quality bark. So this is the only grading of bark we have left. So that's what we're going to use. Maybe use a little bit more sphagnum, and that should be perfectly fine. And speaking of growing media, the first subject I was thinking of approaching in our unpopular opinions is the organic versus inorganic debate. And that, I call it an unpopular opinion, but that seems to be something that has the whole community split down the middle. Well, speaking of splitting down the middle, this little bulb here is really, really annoying me. So, even though I usually avoid doing this, yeah, gonna get rid of that. So yeah. If you should grow in organic or inorganic media seems to have everyone's opinion split. But I've noticed lately, at least here on YouTube, that a lot more people seem to be growing in organic than not. And you know, it's honestly, this is not like a strong opinion that I have that you should grow organically. It's whatever works for your plants, really. If your plants are growing well, all growing methods are valid, in my opinion. But the reason I'm bringing this up, even though so many people these days seem to be growing in inorganic medium, is we haven't really made the jump to trying it out for ourselves. And this has been for several reasons. The first reason, and the main one, is that organic has pretty much always worked for us. Like most people, when I started growing orchids, I learned about the whole epiphytic mechanics of it, like how in nature they grow on tree bark and that they don't grow in soil like other plants. That because of that they require air movement on top of humidity to their roots. And like all beginners, you learn that the best way to simulate that is with these chopped up pieces of bark in a pot so that the roots can drink, but at the same time have some amount of air around them. This, at the time, made perfect sense to me, and since then it has made sense for my orchids. Mostly they seem to grow well. If they have any problems, it never seems to be related to the growing media they're in. So I never felt that inclined to make the experiment just for the sake of it. I know we have a YouTube channel, but it's mostly to follow our hobby, not as much as to, you know, make experiments and have tutorials for other people to learn. I think that if you're going to teach, you need to be an expert yourself first. And I do not consider myself an expert at all. All I can do is share my experiences, and if someone learns from that, fine. Oh, these two ended up nestling together really well since I cut that bulb off, huh? I'm really glad I went to a smaller pot size. And another reason I never felt very inclined to trying inorganic media has been pure laziness. Because when I watch the videos of my fellow growers who grow in inorganic, it honestly sometimes seems like a hassle. You have to flush the media, you have to be careful with salt buildups. You sometimes have problems with the pH of the growing media that you use, as I've seen in a bunch of videos. So it all seems very complicated and high-tech, and you have to test a lot and correct the pH and the nutrients and salts. Sometimes I've seen people who have issues with the top layer of the inorganic media that they use desiccating the roots. So then you have to add another something on top to stop the roots from desiccating. And if you consider that you have to correct pH, what I learned at the beginning, and I've done a few experiments to test, is that if you use bark and sphagnum, you pretty much have the perfect pH that orchids require to absorb their nutrients. So because of that, I've never really considered trying semi-hydroponics or leca or anything of the sort for my orchids. Well, when I say never, that's not exactly true. And I'll tell you why in an instant. This was a really easy repot. And other than these brown spots on the leaves, that honestly might just be the heat, because we've been having a lot of yellowing leaves in a lot of plants, because I guess orchids do not like temperatures that go up to 35. So other than that, I think this little plant is gonna do just fine. Next up for a repot, we have here our Encyclia mariae that, as you can see, is definitely overdue for a repot. Actually, if we don't intervene soon, these roots are going to grow out of the pot and it's going to be a whole headache. Actually, I probably should have done this a couple of months ago too, but oh well. So as I was saying, between the hassle with the pH and a lot of people online complaining about what a nightmare it is to adapt the roots to a wet-dry cycle if you do semi-hydroponics, it never felt very tempting to me, except one thing, and that is every time I have to repot a Cattleya. That is actually really really big coincidence that that's what I'm doing right now, repotting a Cattleya type. But this is not the type of Cattleya I mean. From my experience, repotting this plant is actually really easy. Since it likes a lot more moisture than other Cattleyas, I use a lot of sphagnum and the repotting just goes great. But normal Cattleyas, I'm pretty sure I've said this in a bunch of videos, and I will say it again until I'm blue in the face. You pretty much just look at their roots wrong and they fall apart. If you use bark, the roots get really stuck to the bark. Even if you soak it while you're repotting, you're pretty much destroying the root system, and your best chance is that you don't destroy all of it and that the plant makes new roots as soon as possible. And it pretty much turns into a 50-50 game on whether your orchid is going to do okay after a repot or if it's going to be a disaster. And those are the only times where I look at inorganic media and I think, why am I not doing that? Because from my understanding, if you use, for example, leca, and it's time to repot because the plant has outgrown the pot or something, you don't actually have to do what I'm doing right now. You don't have to pull every little piece of leca off the roots. It can just stay there because it's not like it's going to go bad. And if you flush the pot, it shouldn't be bad for your plant. But then I think about this. Right now I'm removing a bunch of dead roots. And wouldn't that be hard to do if they were all glued to pieces of leca? I don't know. Honestly, I'm more and more tempted to just trying. instead of just, scoffing at a method that a lot of people seem to have success with. And I've seen some people that initially have success, but then after a couple of years, their plants just aren't thriving as they used to. So it's something that I would probably just try with a plant or two. But still, it's enticing enough that I have to admit, I've bought myself a bag of leca, I've been soaking it, and I think I'm gonna at least do some pH experiments with it. Because maybe I can adapt it in a way that I can reap some benefits from the fact that it's inorganic without changing my growing methods too much. Let me know if that would be an interesting video to watch. I'm thinking of testing the pH of the different growing mediums we have around and try to come up with a way to experiment on a plant or two and see how it goes. If you'd be interested in watching such a video, just let me know. And as you can see, all these back roots are dead, but these ones are doing great, and we have all of these in the new growth that I have to be very careful, because even though this is not a normal quote-unquote Cattleya, it's still a Cattleya, and if I so much as bump these, they're gone. And I really don't want to set back this plant because it flowers for me every year. It's one of my favorites, and I really didn't want to have to skip a year with it, or God forbid, lose it. But I don't think that's a risk here. This might be the most satisfying part of cleaning up these plants. Just removing these old sheaths. You also have to be careful, because this, not as bad as with catasetums, but this could actually harm you. These get sharp. Yeah, see, with all the heat we've been having, even this one with this much sphagnum in the pot is growing accordion leaves. Oh, I hate it. So I'm just gonna finish cleaning this up, and then we'll get back into putting it in a new pot. If you look at it, like a lot of orchid species, this little guy likes to grow slanted, which makes me think that I might have to remove these back bulbs. I'm gonna look at the pot sizes I have, but I don't think I have something this wide that could accommodate these. So most likely I'm gonna end up cutting at least these three. You see, if I just left these out of the pot, this could work. There really isn't that much advantage to it, is there? And they're almost like loose, so here goes nothing. I always feel bad throwing these away. I always feel like I should just propagate them. But these are so small and I don't see any eyes developing, so yeah, I probably shouldn't bother. Honestly, I hope no one was offended by me talking about why inorganic doesn't seem like a great idea for me. It's not like I'm saying you're doing anything wrong. I mean, a lot of people have great success with their orchids in inorganic. I'm just saying that looking at some of the complaints, I've never felt compelled to change it. And who knows? Maybe after a couple of experiments, I'm going to be converted. Oh no, I heard a snap. What was that? Which one of you broke? I guess not. Guess I'm just hearing snaps in anticipation. And just like last time I repotted, I'm going to use a lot of sphagnum. Because even though you look at growing guides for this plant and it says it's a cattleya type, you have to let it dry out. No, it gets completely shriveled unless I use a lot of sphagnum with it. Actually, didn't I repot these two plants in one of these videos 2 years ago? I'm starting to think that completely by coincidence I'm repotting the exact same plants as last time. I don't know, I'll have to check. But not right now because my hands are full. As usual, I separated five plants to repot today, and I'm pretty sure I'm not going to have time for anything else. I had other subjects prepared to talk about, but if I don't have time for the repots, I definitely don't have time to keep talking about supposed unpopular opinions that I don't even know if they are that unpopular. So we're just going to finish up this plant and consider it a win that I even got to repot anything. Because this past month, I've barely spent any time in the orchid room. It's been pretty much impossible. We can barely sleep with the heat we've been getting, let alone be in a humid room that's closed off with a bunch of plants. Yeah, I think we are done. So that's pretty much it for today's video. I was planning for a longer video, but we ended up not having enough time. I hope you still found it entertaining to see how we repotted these two plants and to hear our opinion on inorganic media and maybe future plants. Still, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to put a like on it and subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you again next week. Goodbye.